SEC v. Jarkesy involves what are called administrative adjudications. So when the government comes after someone for violating the law, oftentimes they will file a lawsuit in federal court in front of a real judge, and sometimes, depending on the case, the defendant gets a real jury. But under many statutes, administrative agencies are allowed to bring what are called adjudicative proceedings in front of their own administrative tribunals, in front of administrative law judges. The parties in SEC versus Jarkesy were the Securities and Exchange Commission, which is an administrative agency tasked with enforcing the securities laws, and George Jarkesy, who was an investor who had an investor fund and was accused of defrauding and misleading and misrepresenting to his investors. The Supreme Court was confronted with two questions. The first question is this the kind of case to which a jury trial right would attach? And the second question is this the kind of case that has to be decided in an Article III court to begin with? In many criminal cases, jury proceedings are required, but in civil cases, in cases between two private parties, or where the government is coming after you for civil penalties rather than criminal penalties, a jury trial is not always required. The cases that require juries are those cases in which the remedy is a legal remedy as opposed to an equitable remedy. The classic example of a legal remedy is simply a money judgment. The Supreme Court decided the case 6-3. Because Jarkesy's case involved a legal remedy, civil penalties, he was entitled to a jury trial. The court then addressed whether nevertheless the SEC was allowed to adjudicate the matter without a jury because it involved the public rights exception. Article 3 provides that the judicial power of the United States shall extend to all cases arising under the laws of the United States. Well, Jarkesy's case arose under a law of the United States. He was accused of violating various federal securities laws. So simply from a textual matter, it would seem that his case falls within Article 3 of the Constitution. There is an exception, however, to Article 3 called the public rights exception. This has to do with the distinction between public rights and private rights. So what's the distinction between public rights and private rights? Well, private rights are those rights that you have in the state of nature. Think of life, liberty, property. These things don't depend on government. Public rights are different. They're things that only exist by grace of government, by virtue of government. The classic example of this is a welfare benefit or a public land grant, and the Supreme Court concluded that this involved private rights and therefore there was no exception. The significance of the Jarkesy decision is that it takes a portion of cases currently heard in front of administrative law judges and requires that they be heard in front of an Article 3 court and oftentimes a jury. This makes part of the administrative state more consistent with the original meaning of the Constitution. Practically speaking, however, the impact of the Jarkesy decision is not going to be so terrible to many administrative agencies, many of which still adjudicate public rights cases.